Okay, great. So we can get started and we'll just start with introductions. Go ahead, Grayson
Hi, my name is Grayson Havens. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm with the Attorney General's office.
and Betsy.
Betsy Fitzgerald, representing the litigating subdivisions.
Thank you. Tess.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tess Parks, and I was appointed by the Attorney General for someone impacted by substance use disorder.
Thank you. Pat.
My name is Pat Kimball. I was appointed by the Attorney General, and I am the chair for the Maine Recovery Council.
Thank you. Chastity.
Chastity Toole, the executive director of the Maine Recovery Council. So appointed by all of you.
Elizabeth.
Hi, I am Elizabeth Foyer, and I am the coordinator for the Recovery Council.
Thank you. And I am Paul Vinsel. I'm an addiction medicine physician working with Spurwink and Central Maine Medical Center in Lewiston. And I am the chair of the governance committee. So we have only one thing on the agenda today, and that is, I'll actually read it. It says the meeting will involve discussion of changing the statute for MRC to allow discussions of grant evaluations to be performed in private with the results of the evaluations then made public. So I did send out to Grayson and Brendan, Chastity, a proposal that I wrote. And I'm a total novice in writing any type of proposal or draft amendment. So I really want your comments and criticisms and changes to this, or to decide if we even do it. Had a interesting email from Brendan who stated, I think I'm gonna look at it and read it word for word because I think it's important. And he's going to talk about it when he gets on. He said, "Thank you for asking for my input. While I will participate in tomorrow's meeting, I've been told by my office that it would prefer I not be involved in drafting legislative language for an exception to FOA's public meeting requirement, and that the MRC should instead work with the legislature or the revisor's office. I notified Pat and Chastity on Tuesday. FWIW, I don't know what that means." And I'm happy to say this tomorrow also.
For what it's worth.
Oh, okay, for what it's worth. Thank you very much. So Grayson, would you be able to share my proposal? So it's really very quick. It's just an amendment to the statute. We can put up the statute a little bit later, but it says the Recovery Council or its designees may meet in private, not subject to Freedom of Information Act Statute 406, to discuss and score grant applications. Announcements of final decision on grant applications are subject to Freedom of Information Act Statute 406. Thank you, Grayson. You can take that down now, I think. And Maggie asks a question. Oh, and there's Brendan. Chastity.
Before we dive into that, I want to share what I sent for feedback this morning first. I appreciate you trying, and I know it is very tricky if you've never done it before, so don't take it as criticism at all. But my immediate thought when reading it is stating meeting in private and not mentioning executive session or deliberation is going to raise a lot of red flags across the board. And there's a lot of places across the state and nationally that is a big deal right now. So I don't think we want to add to that. I have spoken to Representative Crafts to gauge if she had any interest in putting something in after governance met. And I'll tell you my reasonings for asking Lydia and not asking Holly. With Holly currently on the council, I also don't want it to be perceived as some sort of conflict. Lydia was on the council when this was an issue, is no longer on the council. So that conflict's not there, and would be able to speak about why we're really asking and why it was so problematic. Lydia is open to that. She said to reach out after the meeting. We can talk through, and then we would still have time to work with the revisor's office to draft something so that way it's done right, especially since we can't have Brendan help with us on it. That's mostly it. Oh, there was one other piece. So I think what I would be helpful for today is, instead of trying to draft the amendment ourselves, we put together bullet points of what our goals are, what the actual issue is, and get everything together in a nice little package to be able to share, so that way there's no miscommunication across the board of what we're trying to do and why.
Thank you very much, Chastity, and I appreciate your response to my email. I read that this morning. That was very helpful. Pat, I'm going to let you talk, but then I want to have Brendan speak, okay?
Yeah, I just want to remind people that that this is time sensitive if we want this to go through. I think Chastity has the dates, but and please, Chastity or Tess, correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm not mistaken, what we really need to have is, we don't really need to have the content as much as we need a title and a sponsor. And then if we determine to get it on the list, and if we decide to pull it, we are able to still pull it, and we're able to change the language. But I believe we have to get the placeholder done at a certain time frame, or we'll have to wait a full other year. The other caution as we have this discussion is, I want everyone to remember that once we open up this statute, there's the caution of they can change other things in it. And so we just need to be careful about what we're asking for, and be able to have a good plan and a full agreement of the council as we move forward. And I think that Representative Kraft, as Chastity said, she knows us, she knows the mission of us, and I think she would be an excellent sponsor for that. But those were my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pat. Brendan, I did read your response to my email earlier, and I'd like to give you a chance to talk, and then I have some specific questions for you, if that's okay.
Sure. I've separately emailed both Pat and Paul and Chastity to let them know that my office has told me that it would prefer that I not work on legislative language or an exception to, FOA's public meeting requirement. And, to let you know that the Recovery Council should instead work with the legislator and the revisor's office, as you're already talking about doing. So my office feels like that would be the most appropriate way to go about it. So I'm sorry that I won't be able to be able to provide more detailed assistance on this issue.
Brendan, I really appreciate that. And I have a question, and maybe you can or can't answer it. Do you, as a representative of the AG, or your supervisors in the AG office, are they are you against the Recovery Council amending the statute to allow this?
But I think, I can't, I think it wouldn't be appropriate for me to try to speak about what the Attorney General's position is on this. I think it would be up to him to take a position, or even whether or not he would want to take a position about this. And, that's probably something that would happen. To the extent it happens, it's something that would happen, closer to when this is kind of a live issue.
Would it be appropriate for me to email the Attorney General asking specifically about this?
You're absolutely free to do that.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. So Chastity, I think you put up something, did you put up a date or something in response to Pat saying the time sensitivity?
Yeah, we have to have something in by September 26th.
Nine 26. And our next governance committee meeting will be September 26th. And anything that we do would be just advising and recommendations to the MRC itself, and any decision would have to be by the MRC. So if we are going to do this, we really need to do it today. And Chastity, is Pat correct that we only need a title, like just a placeholder?
Yeah, we don't need the full bill. But we definitely need bullet points for Lydia to work with.
Placeholder
Or,
and a sponsor. Okay, very good.
I mean, after our conversation, she may decide that she doesn't want to do it, depending on what we say here, but we definitely need bullet points to work with for any lawmaker and the revisor's
great.
office.
Okay, great. Tess?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. In terms of process, since we are in the second year of this 132nd legislature, it's for new bills, which this would be, it needs to be voted in with a majority from the Legislative Council, which is made up of leadership for both parties, and they are meeting October 23rd. So we definitely need something more than just the bill title. We would need, hopefully at that point, the revisor's office would have a draft based on our feedback. But with that being said, in terms of longer term picture, there would be opportunities for amendments. It's not like a one and done, whatever the revisor's draft is set in stone. I don't know if this is the right time to bring this up, but I'm hoping at some point we can talk as a group. I've been thinking about this issue a lot and really sitting with it. And I have concerns that if we do this wrong, a future council could abuse the change in the statute. And I really want to talk about safeguards because I believe in transparency. I know that this money was won off of the deaths of our loved ones and friends. And I think the public should know. And I also know that the last grant process had some flaws that was hard on the council and grantees. And I'm not saying I'm against this legislation, but I really feel like we need to talk about what our duty is to protect transparency in the future and now. And I don't know if that's the language we use in the legislation or bylaws, but I'm wondering, has anyone else had this feeling or concern around this topic?
If I can weigh in here for a
Yeah.
second. The Right to Know Advisory Committee to the Judiciary Committee is going to start meeting again later on this month. Senator Ann Carney, I believe, is chairing that. And it might be worth a conversation with her because I know I sit with those guys. And I know we have talked about literally this very issue. I'm not sure there's a resolution there either, but just I guess another perspective might be helpful.
And Betsy, what was the name of the representative?
It's Senator Ann Carney
Senator Ann Carney.
from Cape Elizabeth.
Senator.
Paul, just so you know, in case you're trying to capture all this, I'm taking notes because
Oh,
I didn't see anybody's hands moving, so I'm assuming.
thank you. Thanks, Maggie. Brendan and Maggie came on a little bit late, so why don't we have them introduce themselves? Brendan?
Thanks, Paul. Brendan O'Neill with the Maine Attorney General's Office. I'm not on the council. I work for the Attorney General's Office, providing legal counsel to the Recovery Council.
Thank you. And Maggie?
I'm Maggie McLaughlin, Director of Health and Human Services for City of Portland, on the council as a member representing litigating subdivisions. Perhaps engaged currently in the duplicative task of taking notes, so let me know if somebody else already is.
No, Maggie, I would love you to do that. Thank you. Because your notes are so great. Pat?
So I agree. I hear Tess because I have the same concerns. And so I struggle with the fact that I did not like the way the grant process went. And sometimes I struggle with, is it I didn't like it or it was so foreign to me that it was uncomfortable? Because I've never scored grants that way before. It was always done. I read them, we talked about them, we scored them, made the announcements. All the information was made public if you had an appeal. So again, I don't know whether I was so uncomfortable with the way it was done so publicly because it was done in the public or was so foreign to me, which is different. And it is my fear because the only thing I wanted in that statute for me personally to be changed was to be able to score in the grants in some sort of executive session, and then everything about that would be made public afterwards. But it was sort of like, how can we have private conversations in regards to, are we scoring this fairly? Did I see this? Did we do that? How do we do this? And again, it is a fear of mine. If you open up the statute, what happens, because I don't want to lose the transparency of this group. It took 2 years to get used to the fact that every meeting is public, that it's all on YouTube. I mean, it's very different. And so that's the caution I have about that. But I do know when I listened to the evaluation, everybody seemed to be uncomfortable with that piece of it. So I'm in favor of the change of statute if it is only in regards to the scoring aspect of the grants.
Pat, can you clarify that for me? Because when I was scoring the grants, I was doing that, I was just doing that in my room.
Yeah.
In my recliner. I think I got a DVT from being in my recliner for so long. But I don't know what you mean by scoring the grants.
So when I scored grants for, let's say, MEHAF, or the United Way works both ways. So you score the grant in your home, and then you meet as a group after all the scores are tabulated. You meet as a group and you discuss the process, and you ask questions. And then you're developing the list of awardees. Who are we going to award them to? Is there some concerns? And in some cases, not so much with MeHAF, with United Way, you were able, if you found out information at that meeting that may have changed your score, you had the ability to change your score. For instance, if I said, oh, I didn't see this in the grant when I read it. Someone says, oh, it was right there. Oh, okay, I'll change that score. But that was my choice to do it. But those conversations were done in private. For instance, we had one meeting with the entire council where we started putting things up on the wall and determining who was scoring what. And then we were pulling out the grants, asking questions about it, someone saying, gee, I don't know. That's the meeting I would have liked to had an executive session and not in public. And I think that's what both people who were awarded the grant and people who weren't awarded the grant said was really hard to listen to and was really seemed unprofessional.
Do you see, well, before I ask that question, let me talk, Brendan, go ahead.
Well, Paul, why don't so I'll offer to not interrupt this sort of flow of discussion about the substance. I can wait if you prefer.
No, I don't, you can go ahead.
My only point is, and I think the council has talked about this in the past, in terms of like when somebody can speak, when the council has taken a position on something versus when somebody speaks as a member of the council. Just to revisit, in the past when people say, I have an opinion about something, I happen to be serving on the Recovery Council, but my views aren't the Recovery Council's. That's one way of taking a position. But if the council is going to take a position before the legislature or otherwise, I think my advice in the past has been that there should be a vote on that. And, it's probably the chair who communicates that position. So just wanted to remind everybody of that process.
When we had the grant process, the thing I was most uncomfortable with was that it wasn't as transparent as I would like it to be. That the first day of approvals was very transparent. The second day was more, we had a kind of a deal, or had this group of grants that we were going to approve, and it wasn't 100% transparent why each one was being approved. So for me, and this probably points to my inexperience with grant application procedures. My concern was that it wasn't transparent enough.
So I've thought about that, Paul, about that second round and how we did it. And for me, that second round, when we made the decision, if hindsight is wonderful and if we can relive things, I would have put it on hold, that we did not have enough time to discuss it. So I didn't see it so much as we weren't transparent. I would have liked more time to have discussed it. But we sort of were in this place where we were trying to be respectful for people who had worked so hard, who were getting off the council to be part of that decision, that these grantees be awarded. And again, in hindsight, in true honesty, I wished we could have just said, you know what, we haven't had enough time to think this through. We need to keep talking. But we voted on it. And I felt not so much that I wasn't transparent. Doesn't mean that's not who I felt rushed in a decision. And that for me was a little unsettling, but I felt rushed.
Chastity had suggested that we write down what our goals would be, and what we felt needed to be changed about the grant application process or the grant decision process. And I think that's a good place to start. And then see how we try to achieve those goals. Does that make sense to people? Yes, Maggie.
I guess one anchor point that I feel like I don't think any of us have trouble with the fact that we are talking about amazing institutions. It's more the sensitivity of comparability between institutions and some of the background information around capacity gaps within institutions. And discussing that publicly can actually undermine the institution itself. You know, maybe they're struggling and their performance on prior grants has been poor, and it's not a great fit. We want to discuss that for the grant that they applied for with us, but we don't want to make that information widely known and prejudice other potential funders for that institution. And if we don't do that, we're automatically kind of making people reluctant to send their kind of private information that we need. So it's not confidential information. It can't be protected in that sense. But I think we could try to guardrail a goal that when discussing and comparing institutions for funding opportunities, that there are allowances for executive session around any kind of personally identifiable or organizationally identifiable capacity, strengths, and weaknesses. Maybe that might be a way to frame it. We can still debate the merits of other elements of the grants in public, but it's really about those capacity, strengths, and weaknesses and comparability between them.
Well said.
How would that work functionally?
That's where I don't know, and the revisor's office can help us figure it out. But to me, we're not trying to hide the entire grant review process. We're not even trying to hide our scoring. We're just trying to hide the discussion that leads to the scoring as it relates to capacities.
So a goal would be to not hide. A goal would be to
sensitively handle
the capacity. How did you put it, Maggie?
Sensitively handle any institutional capacity information.
Okay. I think that makes sense.
Potential grantee institutional capacity information.
And what is the revisor's office?
You guys will be able to answer that one better than I can. Tess, maybe. Chastity.
Yeah, it's all individuals that have experience crafting legislation. I believe they're all lawyers and are very familiar with Maine statute and have the knowledge and base to help individuals and lawmakers come up with the language to have their ideas become a piece of legislation.
Okay, thank you. Does what Maggie said seems to be kind of from what I could understand of the discussion so far, that seems to be pretty much summarize what our main goal is. Is that correct?
It is to me. I don't know about anybody else.
So I guess our ask is really just to ask that executive session be allowed in incidences where we are discussing potential grantee institutional capacity information. And so that still means, like, if we're discussing scope alignment with the ask or things like that, that stuff is all still public.
So here's an interesting question I have. We don't have an appeal process. Do you think, and this is just throwing it out there, that, you know, by doing this kind of thing in executive session, do you think it would make the public feel a little different if we did have an appeal process? Because right now there isn't one. There's no way to appeal it.
You mean if we were able to go into executive session to discuss to sensitively discuss individual applicants' capacity, we would then, at that point, we would have an appeals process because the public is not privy to those conversations. Is that what you mean, Pat?
Well, I sort of mean that it's just sort of a transparency thing that if someone was confused as to why they didn't get the grant and thought they should, didn't think they were treated fairly, you can appeal it, which means, you can ask for scores of other things. I mean, it's all public anyways. I was just throwing it out there. It just happened to hit me. I mean, again, most grants have an appeal process. We decided not to. We certainly didn't hear any feedback when we interviewed people saying, well, you didn't have an appeal process. So I'm not sure it mattered to them anyways. I just threw it out there.
My concern, and again, I'm very inexperienced with this, is if you have an appeals process, every applicant that wasn't chosen would appeal.
No,
No,
that's
not
not
what
my,
happened.
at least that's not my experience.
Okay.
As there will be people who may appeal, and sometimes in the process by saying, I think I'm going to appeal, it gives me the opportunity to review all the documents. Once I've reviewed all the documents, I'll say, oh, that's why I didn't get it. Never mind, I'm not going any further. But I've never, because I could be wrong, I've never been in a process. I've been reviewing United Way grants that has an appeal process for 30 years. In 30 years, there's been only 3 people in the 30 years that have appealed.
Okay. And right now, after we had the grant applications and we had chosen the awards, those that were getting awards, did everyone that applied, did they have access to the scores?
If they asked Mary, I believe Mary gave them.
Okay.
I believe there was a couple organizations, and Chastity, or Elizabeth or Grayson, I don't know whether you're involved with that, but I believe there was a couple organizations that asked, and Mary gave them some information. I'm not sure how much or how little.
Okay. Thank you, Pat. Maggie?
I wonder if we can, my broad thought, I appreciate the desire for an ability to build trust in the process, but I feel like if we were to open up the appeal process, we don't have any additional money. So let's say they successfully appeal, we've already allocated the additional funds, and so I think that may also lead to challenges in delaying the timeline of being able to release the other funds. And my prior experience as a grantee is that that's not usually available as an option. You can appeal an eligibility determination if you were excluded from the process because you were ineligible and you feel you actually were eligible, but you can't appeal your score or whether you were awarded the funds, which really is more about future funding. You know that you'll be eligible in the future. So I think it may help, but that it may also be with the unintended consequence of delaying that timeline or offering kind of false hope around funding. And so I would kick it to the grants committee to think about how they build trust in that process from other angles.
Pat, do you think that if we did have a process where the MRC or subcommittees could go into executive session to sensitively discuss different organizations' capacity, that would decrease the trust in the grant application process by the public?
I can't speak for the public. I don't know. I know that would seem more of the norm to me. That's what happens in any grant I've ever applied to, is that you have that capacity. I think, again, I think that Tess and Chastity both talked about to be cautious of the wording, and what we're doing is to not look like we're trying to hide anything and not be transparent. And so I did like how that was worded, but again, I caution myself personally only because this process is so different from anything I'm ever used to. Change isn't easy. And so I have to look at, am I doing it because of my discomfort or what's in the best interest of public? And again, I trust the council is going to use it to better serve the community, but I don't know if the community has that same view as me. That I can't answer.
Go ahead, Tess. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks everyone. I appreciate this conversation. I feel like I'm processing in real time. And Pat, I liked how you mentioned that discomfort piece, because a lot of this probably does feel uncomfortable. It's a unique, once in a lifetime pot of money. And what makes it, different than just your standard maybe grant program through a foundation is that we're really talking about public dollars where we're triggering public conversations. So to me, it raises it to a higher level of scrutiny, and it should be based on the reasons why we have this money in the first place and the people impacted. I'm almost wondering, is there a way that we can improve the scoring process, or do we need better tools to have conversations? I wasn't there at the first round, but I've also never been a scorer. So I'm sure there's probably not only discomfort from the content of maybe bringing up an organization's capacity, but not having done it before. We're a group of volunteers. So I'm thinking, our capacity, can we get technical assistance with something like that? I mean, even looking at this a state RFP where they put up a 120-page package with every score's comments. There's so much detailed information where it becomes really clear why an award was granted. And my understanding is that they do have a space where they can come together in private, but it is all transcribed. And anyone in the public can go look at this 130-page document. So I wish I had a proposed solution. I want to be solution based, but this conversation just brings up a lot, and I think it's worth taking the time to have it from what's at stake, because we may be a council of well-intentioned individuals, but the likelihood this is an 18-year pot of money. We have to think of the future as well. There could be people that are not good actors that don't have the transparent public interest in mind. And what happens when they go into executive session and there's no guardrails? I think that's something we owe it to the public. Because for me, it's not even just the appearance, it needs to be the safeguard, that transparency in decisions. I don't know. I've said a lot. I'm ranting at this point, but this is just bringing up a lot.
Well,
Tess, I tend to agree with you that I would like to be very cautious. And I feel pressured because of this being time sensitive to get it into this legislation. And I'm not sure that I feel comfortable enough to recommend an amendment to the statute without more discussion with the entire MRC and talking to the Attorney General, the Revisor's Office, the Right to Know Committee, which there's no way that I'm going to be able, or any of us are going to be able to get that all done before September 26th. And I worry that we make a mistake and that mistake will carry through to the next 16 years of the Recovery Council. Pat, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I agree. I think that as much as we like things done instantly, I think that this is a slippery slope that we're looking at. We will most likely have, we will have a new governor. We will have new legislators in another, year and a half. And so you could have another attorney general. We really don't know. And I really, caution that we don't want to lose the mission of the council, which is about getting this fund out there and being as transparent as we possibly can. And you're changing statute, which means it's not like you're changing a bylaw and you can go to the council, you get a vote or whatever. You're changing statute, which again, and then as I shared with you earlier, my concern is anytime you open it up, they could have a whole other discussion during a legislative committee meeting and they could change stuff that we're saying, no, don't do that. So I think we, as a council, I think are wise to take the next year to think about that, to think about what we want to do. Do we really want to change it? How do we want this to look like? How do we want to say? And I'm sure we can get legislators like Representative Kraft or other people, legislators, to be able to hear us and listen to us. But I think to quickly push this through, I don't think that's to our benefit or for the people that we're trying to serve.
Tess, go ahead. Pat, thank you so much.
And just
Yeah.
out of curiosity, is there anyone in the group that feels really strongly that the council should move forward, as in this legislative session?
I guess I don't feel strongly that we should move forward in this legislative session. I just feel that the consequence of not moving forward now means we'll probably go through another grant cycle that feels like we did not listen to the feedback that the initial grantees gave us, that they did not like that and they wanted a change. And so it's a double-edged sword. They specifically said this didn't work for them. And if we're not adjusting, that also undermines trust.
But you have one more year left. Those were 2-year contracts. So we most likely will not go out for grants for another year.
Some of the prevention ones though, right?
Oh, yeah, the prevention ones will even be even longer out because those were there. I mean, it is a risk, and I hear you, Maggie, but again, I also don't want to make a mistake by
I read in the newspaper about either a county or a municipality that has seemed to lose about $120,000 of their opioid settlement funds. And they don't have minutes of any of the council meetings when they discussed that. Those minutes have been lost also. And I found it a really interesting article as we were talking about this and transparency. Does anyone know? I don't recall what county or municipality that was.
Was it Waldo or Washington?
I think it was Waldo. It was Waldo.
Yeah, and I ran into an interesting thing in Penobscot County, and this is how innocent that can happen. So in Penobscot County, the commissioners appointed people to serve on a committee to distribute the opiate funds. We didn't even think about it. We met like 3 times, and we didn't include the public, and it became this huge piece that no one sitting there, and I being one of them, thought anything of it. We were just trying to put ourselves together and have some thoughts. Next thing you know, the Bangor Daily News said we were meeting in secret, and was like, whoa, we really, again, I guess we sort of, that's the perception. We didn't feel like we were just trying to have initial conversations. And so that's how easily that if you don't think about the transparency from the very beginning, it was a mistake of that counts of the Penobscot County. We've since rectified it. The meetings are now public, but it can quickly end up in the Bangor Daily News. It's like you're meeting in secret. And that wasn't the intent, but it was how it was perceived. And I get why it was perceived that way, because we just didn't think about it. So you always have to think about the transparency. But yeah, that county, I think, was Waldo County.
Yeah.
Penobscot just had the 3 secret meetings. They weren't really secret, but yeah.
We had talked about the goal of sensitivity when discussing organizations' capacity during the grant applications. Can we achieve that sensitivity in a public meeting? And what would that look like? How could we change the way we did it to have more sensitivity towards that?
I'll just to bring up the state RFP again, you know, the rubric is really clear, and say there's a spot that's like organizational capacity, and then the score could put does not meet, or what there's wording, and I'm sure there's training that they receive on how to do that without saying something disparaging, and that's public information.
So
Maggie.
those are things, Tess, that we could add to our rubric. If that was part of our issue, was that concern. I don't think that was part of our scoring rubric. And so we could add that to it so that that's where that would be looked at.
Maggie? Thank you, Pat and Tess.
I wasn't here for the process, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that in general, we can get to a place where the scores that we individually create and even the consensus score is public and sensitively written. It's really the debate that happens when you're reaching that consensus. So, you know, for example, this executive director is leaving in a week, and the entire organization exists based off of their presence. And so that affects their ability to take on something that would be a huge scale jump up, right? It's those kind of conversations. They're saying on their official documentation that they completed these grants, but maybe you're aware that 3 of those were canceled early because of underperformance or something like that. It's those kind of conversations that are about why did you score it that way that you don't want to be having in public. And I think we will self-censor certainly as well, to the detriment of the impact of the funds. If we had to have a conversation, I think we largely won't. If, you know, that would be the risk.
Thank you, Maggie. And that's exactly what I talked to the woman who did the
Evaluation,
evaluation of the grant. She and I talked about that.
Sarah, yeah.
That specific subject. Chastity.
This just kind of goes to what Maggie was talking about and my experience on that very public meeting the first day. There were applications we had that scored really, really well. And the experts in said pillar couldn't score if they had a conflict, which basically everybody did. There were some that scored really well, but there would, if an expert scored that, they'd be like, oh, actually, I don't think that is, but they weren't going to say so. And we had applicants that their applications scored great, but there was a lot of turmoil happening in those organizations that several of us knew about, but we could not say that publicly on a Zoom because it would be really disparaging to people and communities. And like, that's the biggest issue to keep in mind as we navigate this. However, like, how do we say those things that aren't going to hurt multiple people in different ways?
Hmm. Tess, thank you.
Just kind of brings up something. I don't know if anyone saw it. There was some news coverage on the Presque Isle City Council. They had voted to be able to discuss which airline carrier they would go with in executive session. And that has sparked quite a debate. And at the heart of some of their debate is having public conversations about the merits of the airline. And you have, one counselor, I think, who had said, I think you can have those discussions in a respectful way. And then others had voted, but not just public perception, real, but it's caused quite the stir. And it seems very similar to this. And I think if there isn't even an attempt to figure out if there's a way to do it, and we need to go behind closed doors, it also raises, are we scoring people based on the application, or are we scoring information on our insider takes? Which brings up a whole level of issues for me.
Because technically, if you're trained in grant writing, those conversations based on your knowledge, you're scoring it based on what's in front of you, not necessarily on that. And that's the caution they will give you in a training about scoring a grant. It's scoring what's in front of you, not what you know. But then again, if you know something like they're about to lose their certification, do you not mention that? But when you're trained to score what's in front of you.
Maggie?
I agree. It is unfortunately a little bit subjective and it should be based off of what's in there. But I think that's a great example, Pat, of the certification, that would be critical info and that would affect the community and that would affect, somebody else's ability to get funding to drive forward that end goal. I also think it's really different when we're critiquing a national company versus critiquing our neighbors. And we have to recognize those relationships are both strengths and real. It's a real risk that could become a challenge, but I think there's much more sensitivity to it because they are our neighbors and they are supporting our communities that we live and work in.
Being sensitive to time, what I'd like to present in my committee report to the MRC next week is that we had a very robust discussion and that we feel that that this is going to require more discussion with the entire MRC before we come up with any type of recommendation of changing the statute or how to make the grant decision process transparent and sensitive at the same time. Does that make sense to everyone? And I don't think we need a vote for that. Is that, Pat, do we need a vote for that?
No, that's just the consensus of the committee, unless someone wants to share an opinion. What I'm hearing is that the committee is recommending that we continue to explore it. But right now, in this time frame for this current legislation, we just don't feel that we have explored enough our process to make a change in statute. Because that's what you're doing. It's not a little thing. It
Yep.
sounds little, but you're changing statute.
Brendan, does that make sense to you? Okay. I want to thank everyone for this really good discussion. I learned so much from all of you. Maggie, I appreciate your concerns and that we address the feedback we got from our applicants, because I think that's really important, and how to do that in a sensitive way while protecting transparency. Brendan?
Thanks, Paul. And, I hesitate to say this because it'll probably mean more work for me, but, I think it's worth picking up the thread that Chastity articulated about how the conflict of interest policy plays a role in the review process. And whether, I heard on the one hand, the conflict of interest policy, prevented those with, useful knowledge. Chastity, if I'm saying something, like if I'm misstating what you were saying, correct me, although I do have to go. But I heard the conflict policy prevented those with knowledge of what's happening on the ground from, making that knowledge available to the council, or inhibited people from making that knowledge available to the council. On the other hand, I heard, I think, a comment from Tess along the lines of, would that be, prejudicial because it's not part of the application? And I suppose if a state RFP is being reviewed, maybe the reviewers have that kind of knowledge or experience with the applicants, maybe they don't. So I think, it's worth just thinking about that piece of it as the council goes forward in terms of how its grant application process should work in the future.
Okay, it's just about noon. And does anyone have any further comments before we adjourn the meeting?
I have one quick comment, and probably Elizabeth can answer. Elizabeth, do we have a consensus on the public date of the public forum?
I have, I think, 4 more people that I'm gonna reach out to
Okay.
to confirm that date works, but it looks like it's gonna be the Friday date in November, which would be the 14th. But I will follow up with those people and let everybody know. The Thursday date, it has like 1 or 2 other people, so it's going back and forth, but I will let everybody know.
Thank you.
Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and adjourn this meeting? And I want to thank you all, and I will hopefully see all of you in person next Thursday.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everybody. Have a good
Bye-bye.
weekend.